So you have to keep track of, like, what's my long-term goal? My long-term goal isn't to take that machine gun nest, it's to win the war.
Unlike a team where no one takes ownership of the problems and therefore the problems never get solved, with us, everyone took ownership of their mistakes. Everyone took ownership of the problems. And when a team takes ownership of its problems, the problems get solved. And that is true on the battlefield, it is true in business, and it is true in life. So I say, take ownership. Take extreme ownership. Don't make excuses. Don't blame any other person or any other thing. Get control of your ego. Don't hide your delicate pride from the truth. Take ownership of everything in your world, the good and the bad. Take ownership of your mistakes, take ownership of your shortfalls, take ownership of your problems, and then take ownership of the solutions that will get those problems solved.
If I'm in charge, or if I'm in charge of a squad, and it's like, hey, we're gonna go assault that bunker on the top of the hill. Okay, there's a bunker on top of the hill with a machine gun in it. My squad, we're gonna go assault it. If we charge uphill to an elevated position, I know there's a lot of vets in here, what's gonna happen? Okay, yeah, 2 or 3 of us get killed, like that. You know what? We never quit. Go again. 2 or 3 more guys died. Go again. Everyone's dead. Did I never quit? I never quit. Did I fail my mission? Yes, I did. So you have to keep track of, like, what's my long-term goal? My long-term goal isn't to take that machine gun nest, it's to win the war. So if you're doing something on a daily basis and you start feeling casualties, you need to assess yourself and say, you know, you can have a business idea, and I've talked to a bunch of people like this. They got that business idea and their mindset's, I'm never gonna quit. Well, then they're running out of money, not just money for their business, money for their family. And it's like, okay, hey, if you've got it, what adjustments can you make strategically? Because the pattern that you're going right now, if you keep charging up that hill with that business the way you are, everyone dies. If you say, you know what, time for a tactical retreat, time for me to step back, time for me to call up some firepower to come and help drop some bombs on this target or get some fire support, whatever the case may be. So keep that in mind as well.
You better be humble when you show up at the SEAL teams, because you don't know anything. And if you think you know something, you find out really quickly that you don't. And so it's actually easy, because if you're humble and you have an open mind and you're willing to listen, the guys are willing to teach you. And it's fundamental things that you can learn pretty quickly. But anybody that comes in that's arrogant, that thinks they know everything, they're gonna have problems. And again, that's the same thing you see in the business world. When we work with companies where the company that is actually asking us to come in, and maybe the CEO is saying, hey, we want you to come and help us, that company, they're already doing well. They're already being successful. And their attitude is, hey, we need help. We want to get better. We want to be more successful. And those companies, they ramp up really quickly, and we have a great time working with them. Sometimes we work with companies where, let's say we get brought in by the board, brings us in because the company's not doing well. Well, right off the bat, the company's not doing well, and they don't think they need any help. And so it's the opposite effect. They're saying, well, we don't need any help. We don't need you guys here. And the fact of the matter is, they need us more than the other folks do. But the reason that they need help is the reason we're there in the first place. It's the reason they're not doing well, because they're not looking at themselves every day humbly and saying, what can we do better? How can we improve? How can we adjust right now and turn our game around or improve our game so that we can get better in the market?
0 people in the world are not getting tapped out. Everyone is getting tapped out. And so everyone, when you learn, you eventually realize, hey, it's about who's training, who's been training longer, and it doesn't make me a better person. It just means that I caught that individual at that moment in time. So it definitely teaches you about humility. It's the same thing that combat teaches you. Combat teaches you humility. And when you go overseas, and especially for me from a leadership perspective, as good as you think you are, there's gonna be things that you can't control. And there's gonna be things that happen, and the control of the situation is gonna slip out of your fingers. And that is a very humbling thing to go through, especially if you've got guys that get wounded, you've got guys that get killed, and it doesn't matter how hard you worked and what you did and the effort you put in, you don't have control over everything. And that is the most humbling part about going into combat, is that you're not as good as you think you are. And I was just coming out of BUD/S. I thought I was a tough guy, and here this guy, he just easily choked me, arm locked me. I couldn't do anything to him. I started off with what I considered leadership building blocks 1, 2, and 3 from my life, from these specific events or these specific scenarios, and I applied those for the rest of my career and for the rest of my life, and I apply them today. And so what I did was I started off by telling these 3 stories about my first platoon, my second platoon, my third platoon. My first platoon, to summarize the story, we were doing a training operation. We get into this tactical situation. Everyone in my platoon is focused on one area. Everyone's looking down their weapons, waiting for a threat to expose itself, which means you got 16 guys looking down their weapons, and I'm waiting for someone to make a call. I was a new guy. I'm waiting for someone above me in the chain of command to say, hey, move here, or hey, move forward, or make some kind of a decision. And I realized, okay, I need to actually put these principles in a field manual that people can pragmatically take the lessons, take the principles, and apply them to what's happening in the world. And that's what I try to do in the new field manual. So if you want to see what happens to human beings, how they behave, see what they do in a concentration camp.
Everyone wants to have more free time. Those are 2 really easy examples to understand. If you want to have financial freedom, well, then how are you going to get there? The answer is you have to have financial discipline. And same thing with more free time. If you want to have more free time, then you have to have a more disciplined time management schedule. And you have to have discipline in your life to say no to the things that aren't actually moving you towards whatever goals you have. So, you have to have the discipline to not click YouTube video that brings up. But the reality is when you sleep in, now you don't get things done. And now those things that you were supposed to do aren't done, and now the next day you have to wake up early and get them done, not because you want to, but because you have to. So you've become a slave to the fact that you didn't have discipline. So if you actually want to have freedom in your life, you have to implement discipline on yourself. And the other one is called action. And so the thought section is kind of the things that I think about and the reasons and kind of the why I am the way I am. And then the actions are the actual things that I do in my life, from workouts to what I eat to how I sleep to how I recover from injuries to how I actually manage my day and train. So that's the way it's broken up. And
I was not really good at anything. I wasn't the best runner, I wasn't the best swimmer, I wasn't the best at the ops course. I was kind of in the middle on everything, which is actually not a bad place to be, because if you're great at something, it usually might mean that you're weak somewhere else. So for instance, guys that were great at the obstacle course, maybe they weren't that good in the water, or someone that was a great runner, maybe that weren't that great of a swimmer. So if you were great at something, sometimes you had weakness in other areas. For me, I was not that great at anything, but I didn't have any super weaknesses. You go there, you have to run, swim, do a bunch of push-ups, pull-ups, dips, rope climbs. That's what you do. Sometimes you don't get to sleep very much. Sometimes you're really cold, but it's all just not that big of a deal. You go there, you don't quit. It's not some big life-changing experience. I didn't have some eureka moment about my inner self or anything like that. You show up, you don't quit. That's what training is. And so and plus it's a little tiny part of your career. I mean, the times when you get to the SEAL teams, you're gonna be colder, you're gonna be more tired, you're gonna work harder, you're gonna be put out more physically when you're in the SEAL teams. So the training is not that big of a deal. Can there still be legitimate reasons? Yes, there can. And for me, the difference, the line between an excuse and a reason is a reason you have zero control over. Right? You just have zero control over something happening. Well, that's a reason. Let me ask you this. Did we have a ground-based plan for the operation in case the weather came in, we were going to take vehicles instead? If you get sick before the competition, maybe you ask yourself, were you resting properly? Were you eating properly going into the competition so you wouldn't get address that, correct? So you can still take ownership of things even if the initial reaction is like, oh, well, you can't control that. Well, you can influence it. You could mitigate it. If I'm going to an appointment and I have the excuse in my back of my head that, you know what, if I'm late, I'll just say it was the traffic, I have a much more increased chance of being late. So that's one of the things that makes extreme ownership hard, is it hurts your ego. It hurts your ego. It hurts your ego to admit that you have control over things that went wrong. It's your fault. That hurts your ego. It's also effective because of that. It's effective because you solve problems, like I said, before they even happen. You solve them because you take ownership of them.